Tim and Dana podcast show. Don't you know that Bigfoot is on the go? It's the Tim and Dana podcast show. Don't you know that Bigfoot is on the go? It's the Tim and Dana podcast show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Bigfoot Podcast Show. I'm Dana Halloran.
And I am Tim Halloran. We are just thrilled and thankful for each and every one of you joining us every week or every month. We're not really on every week, and we can't wait to talk about our guest that's coming on, who's just a person who cool things going on, from Bigfoot to butterflies and poetry, and I'm sure I'm missing. He's also an author, a PhD, tons and tons of stuff that we're going to get into, and we're just, again, really excited to have him on, and he's no rookie to this Bigfoot thing. So he's been around. Been around for a long time. Like somebody who, has had, contact with Grover Krantz. So, from all those guys back in the day, I think they call them the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen of Bigfoot. Bob definitely knows them. So we would definitely like to introduce Dr. Robert Michael Pyle. Hey, Bob, how are you? Welcome.
Hello, Tim and Dana. It's the Tim and Dana show.
Do you love that?
I love that.
One of my dear friends and her husband recorded that for us. We love it. It's just a lot.
It's fun.
A lot of fun. So thank you.
So
so here we have you, and there's just so much about you, Bob. So we're going to have to try to get this all in. One of the first things that I'm noticing here, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, is that you are a lepidopterist.
That's close. It's lepidopterist.
Lepidopterist. You got to get the P.
Yeah, lepido means scales or shingles, and pteris the scaly winged insects, the butterflies and moths.
Okay, so are those the only scaly winged insects?
They are.
Okay. What about dragonflies? I have a little dragonfly necklace on.
If you look at their wings, they're naked. They're clear membranes.
Okay.
Has its scales removed, and they lose them all through their life. So sometimes a really old butterfly or certain species that lack very many scales are transparent. You've seen pictures of the glass-winged butterflies, and they don't have scales, so you can look right through them. But most butterflies have their wings covered with these little shingles that give them their color. Some are metallic and iridescent, they're structural scales, and others are pigmented like our skin. Most of them are like that. So I did my doctoral work, and most of my scientific work has been with the ecology of rare butterflies.
So then obviously you're also an author. Now, were you also a professor? Did you ever teach?
Oh, yes. I've taught at a number of colleges and universities. I was a professor at Evergreen State College, Utah State University, and the University of Montana. And I've taught and lectured at many, many other colleges on a drop-in basis. But I went freelance back in 1982, realizing that a full-time academic career would not give me the time I wanted in the field and for writing. I'm a writer. I've got 30 books of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, and of science. But I wanted that time in the field. I wanted the independence, and I didn't like committee meetings. So I went independent. I became an independent scholar in 1982 in a freelance, and I've been teaching, lecturing, and doing a certain amount of contract biology, but mostly my teaching, lecturing, and writing. And the writing, it's hard to make a full living on writing, as any of your authors will tell you. But that's been those have been my big triangle, my tripod have been writing, teaching, and lecturing.
And you've lived across the country, traveled the world. I mean, even over on the East Coast. We live on the East Coast. We're in Delaware. I know you lived in Connecticut at one point, didn't you?
Yes, I did my doctoral work at Yale, and so I lived in Connecticut for several years. Grew up in Colorado, I've lived in Papua New Guinea and California and England several years, but for 46 years, I've made my primary domicile here in Southwest Washington, right in the epicenter of you-know-who's countryside.
We do know who. Yeah, we were there last a little over a year ago. So we'll
Yeah.
talk about that too, because I'm going to ask you how close we were, but we'll get to that here shortly.
Sure.
So, do you have a favorite book? I mean, you've all authored. I knew you're well over 20. I didn't realize it was over 30. Do you have, outside of the one that we're going to talk about today, do you have a favorite?
Of my books.
Yes.
That's like asking for your favorite child, of course, or the prettiest butterfly, the most beautiful city. But in some ways, I can make a case for every single one of my books for myself. But in many ways, Where Bigfoot Walks, Crossing the Dark Divide is my favorite. Not only because it drew me very close to the land, which is what I'm all about, but because I'm so intrigued with our common love of Sasquatch, and because of the people it's brought me in touch with, not necessarily the toxic battles in the Bigfoot field. Haven't enjoyed that part so much, and also seeing people's lives ruined by Bigfoot fever, which can run rampant in a person's life, of course. But many other aspects I've enjoyed dearly. I love my book Wintergreen and its daughter, which is called Sky Time in Grays River. In many ways, my novel Magdalena Mountain is a favorite because it took me deep into my Colorado mountain territory with another butterfly, another creature I love called the Magdalena alpine, a black butterfly that lives in the Colorado Rockies. It became a character in the book. And just recently, a few weeks ago, I returned from Chile on a research trip having to do with a silver butterfly, entirely silver on its upper side, like quicksilver, like the chrome in a 54 Chevy. It's that silver.
Wow.
And that will be a character in a sequel to Magdalena Mountain that I'm working on now called The Silver Satyr. But so every book of mine, several of my poetry books are very dear to my heart. However, I have to say, Where Bigfoot Walks is probably my favorite book.
Yeah, and this is the book that we're going to be talking about today. It's a really thick book too. It's a lot of stuff in here.
It's a substantial book. I have to say it's I don't like to speak highly of my own writing. I do believe that pride goeth before a fall. And I don't say this in pride, but in many ways, I think it is the most substantial of the Bigfoot books. And there are several very good Bigfoot books out there. I love John Bindernagle's. Grover's was very helpful. Jeff Meldrum's is profound. Lots of others. Peter Burns were the best campfire reads by far of anything. But my book is the one Bigfoot book that combines. It was written by both a trained ecologist, biologist, scientist in the field, as well as a literary writer. And it's the one book that tries to combine those two and does not try to either prove, disprove, find, or not find it, but it goes into the whole phenomenon as to what it implies in our culture. And I think, and I did know all the Four Horsemen. So I didn't know Bob Titmus. The other guys I knew quite well. Peter I knew very well. John Green. I even knew Renata Hinden and of course Grover. And I've had a long history with this and a lot of Native American connection, which goes deeply into the book. And so if you'll excuse me, I do recommend the book. The book is published. It's currently in print from Counterpoint Press. It's cheap, not an expensive book, and has that marvelous quotation from Jane Goodall in the back that she gave me. So,
I love that. Can I read that?
Oh, please
Can
do.
I read that?
Please
Yeah,
do.
so she says, I like the book very much, only I don't know why you were so circumspect. To me, the evidence seems overwhelming.
And that's Jane Goodall.
I love that.
So how, and I know the answer, but for the audience, how did you meet Jane Goodall?
Well, we had the same publisher and the same editor. I published a number of books with the grand old publisher Houghton Mifflin, which sadly is becoming extinct now in the modern pressures of publishing. And Jane was writing her books for Houghton Mifflin too. And we shared the same editor, a master natural history editor named Harry Foster. And I read her, she read me, probably not as much as I read her, but we got together over that. And then when I first met her, it was at a gathering put together by the Orion Society, publishes Orion magazine, and I
Mhm.
did a lot of traveling readings for them, and I published a column in their magazine for 10 years running, 52 straight
I
columns.
read that magazine. Is it still around?
It is, yeah, but
Okay.
it doesn't on my column anymore. I had to quit when I left to do a year-long field trip for another book, but it's still there. It's still a very beautiful magazine with no advertising. Anyway, Jane received one of their very vaunted awards called the John Hay Medal. It was given to people like the poet Gary Snyder, E.O. Wilson, the great biologist, um, um, Peter Matheson, people of that caliber, Wendell Berry, and so on. Well, Jane Goodall got it, and they always gave the award on their home ground, except we couldn't go to Gombe Forest to give it to her. So we did it at the Jane Goodall Institute in Washington, D.C. That's where I first met her. And when she gave me that quote, she said, "Bob, why didn't you have me blurb the book?" I said, "Jane, we tried, but we couldn't reach you in Gombe." So,
So
I said,
E.L. Wilson, I think I read a book by him, and I think I did. He wrote a book where it was a letter to a pastor,
yes.
and oh my gosh, it was an amazing book.
Well, Wendell Berry, both of them received the John Hay Medal, both great,
Okay.
wonderful writers, but on different ends of the spiritual spectrum. And E.O. believes that, and I knew him well. I founded the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. He was president of that for 10 years. I visited him several times at Harvard and elsewhere. And E.O. believed that ultimately everything we're in a material world, and it's all subject to the laws of physics and ultimate human understanding if we ever get that far.
Mhm.
Wendell believed in a spiritual component, a spiritual plane, and that there were things beyond our reach and our understanding. And they didn't come to blows over that, but Wendell they were good friends, but then Wendell got pretty upset at E.O.'s book called Consilience, and he wrote a counterblast to it. And then this other book was E.O.'s response to that in the form of a letter to a preacher whom he had known. And so that was
And I
that.
thought he was very, kind to the
Yeah.
pastor in the way he was writing. From a scientist point of view, I think one of the things that stuck out to me most was this comment that he made that why would God be so cruel as to sprinkle the earth with so much evidence countering what the Bible says?
Yeah, it was not an unkind letter at all. And
No.
he was a very loving man. I think they reconciled before E.O.'s death. I hope so. But he didn't want to challenge anybody's faith. Anymore, when I taught environmental writing in Logan, Utah State, all of my undergraduates were Mormon. They were LDS. And I told them, I'm not going to challenge your faith. That's ridiculous. There are many wonderful things about it. But I will try to ask you to think beyond the constraints, perhaps, of your upbringing to see the wider world that you might not have been exposed to. And that's what E.O. tried to do. He didn't try to convince anybody of anything. Not like some of the stridently atheist writers who want to make you believe otherwise. He had no interest in that. He was brought up in an evangelical Southern background. He saw the value of church in those people's lives. He just wanted to open people's eyes to the creation in a sense as it can be interpreted through science. And Wendell, I think, finally got that, I hope. The same way I feel about Bigfoot. I'm not trying to convince anyone or advocate for it. I advocate for an open mind.
Right.
Well, there was never any bickering in the Bigfoot world, right?
Oh, none. And being a good friend of Peter Byrne, one of my informants for the book and one of my mentors, but also a dear friend. Peter, of course, got everybody's wrath. And that went back to the fact that Tom Slick, the heavenly named oil man from Texas, Tom Slick, the oil
Yeah,
man.
how did that happen?
Oh, you know he picked that name out for himself.
If only. But he funded, of course, Peter's early Yeti expedition in the Himalaya. And then he brought Peter to be the leader of the first big American Bigfoot expedition. Well, these North Americans didn't like taking orders from a young upstart Brit, and who was, a showman too, and very charismatic. And enmity began then that never did get over with. Those guys are all dead now, and so we hope we can get beyond those.
I hope so. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to interview Peter for my book before he, recently before he passed, and that was just such a blessing to be able to get him on, have an interview with him. So
absolutely. And I brought Peter back to Yale to give a seminar. I was so impressed by him. When I met him in '75, I was doing my butterfly research out in Washington, and I was already involved and interested in Bigfoot. But I was so impressed by him when I first met him, and his ethic, which was when in doubt, throw it out. He took it basically. Didn't have a scientific background, but he was a superb naturalist, which very others are. And I liked his approach. So I actually brought him back to give a seminar at Yale, and I had to get permission of the vice president of the university to do that. But when he did, I saw this room full of eminent Yale paleontologists, primatologists, anthropologists, biologists who had come to mock, but they didn't mock. They were scratching their heads. Maybe this too. When they heard Peter, he didn't make any converts, nor was he trying to, but he did open some very skeptical, eminent scientific minds that day. And to see that was profound to me and very, very impressive. Peter was a very substantial figure in spite of some of the derogation he got from other quarters. But the fact that he opened those minds, that's when I said, that's what I want to do if I ever get to write about Bigfoot, is open minds.
Yep. So, I'm sorry, Bob. So was it your studying of butterflies, and what was the other insect?
Butterflies, moths.
And moth. Well, yeah. Okay. I always call moths nighttime butterflies. That's
several languages do. In German,
really?
In German, they're called the Nachtfalters, which means the night flyers. Falter means butterfly, or Schmetterling, which not a very pretty word, but they call them Falters and Nachtfalters. Yes.
That's kind of cool. I didn't even know that. That makes sense, though.
They are all moths. Butterflies are a fancy group of moths evolved to fly by day, and consequently more colorful in order to pull all kinds of pranks on birds.
So it was it was your studying of the moths and butterflies that brought you out, obviously, into nature and in the woods. Is that how your interest for Bigfoot came about?
In a way, I mean, my first great love was seashells. Right above me here, I've got a shelf of butterflies a shelf of seashells. It's the very shelf my mother built me when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I have the very same seashells on there that I collected between the ages of 7 and 11. But I lived in Colorado, which was a dumb place to be obsessed with seashells.
Yeah, right.
I was a slow study, and I finally began to figure that out about the age of 11. And that summer, my stepbrother said, "I'm going to go catch bugs for scouts, get a merit badge. Do you want to come with me?" And I said, "Yeah." And I did. I started to see butterflies. And that day we went out, and I became entranced with them. My stepbrother quit the next day, and I never did. I'm still doing it 70 years later, or 60 some years later. But through butterflies and seashells, they were a window on the world, on nature, and I became a very general naturalist. I've tried to study all groups to some extent. I'm a very poor naturalist in many areas, but I tried to know something about most living things, and a lot about some of them in relative terms. And nobody is a truly deep naturalist, but I aspire toward being deeper every day. Now, that set me up for it. But then in the late 60s, very early 70s, I got to take a series of classes on Northwest Native American art and culture. So 3 classes, Northwest Indian, 2-dimensional art, 3-dimensional art, and dance and tradition, by Bill Holm, the great Northwest Indian Authority at the University of Washington, still alive, still the greatest.
How old is he?
Oh, God, he's got to be well into his 90s.
Good for him.
And yes, well, his classes were some of the best classes I ever took in anything in my life. But one thing he did impress upon us was that every single Northwest Indian group, from the Athabascans all the way up in Alaska, down to the Hoopas and below in California, Yurok and everybody else, all the Tsimshians and Bellabellas and Bellacudas and Quackoodles and Haidas, Kitlopes and everybody else in between, they all had profound Bigfoot legend stories, whether it was Sasquatch, Oma, Tsitsiak, Tsetsiurl, so many different names, but they're all the same thing. And not only did they have legends and stories, but in their deep spiritual world of Tsetsiurl, the sea serpent, and the Thunderbird and everything else like that, but also they believed in them to a person as actual physical members of their local fauna, like skunk, weasel, bear, and raven, and frog, and toad, and butterfly. So that impressed me. And then later...
So I'm sorry, so the Bigfoot was regarded differently than the Thunderbird, is what you're saying?
Yes, there are certain creatures that they regard as being really resident in the spirit world. Now, the two are permeable, and they go back and forth, and there's changing and so on, of course. But there are entities that they know they do not see them in daily life, on the res, in the woods, in the ocean. They don't see Cecile, the sea serpent anymore. They don't see the Thunderbird. And there's some other figures, many. But Bigfoot, along with toads and weasels and bears, they see. They believe they're actual animals. And in fact, I've had many occasions with Native Americans. Once I finally learned to shut up and learn the polity, the politesse of how you learn, how you speak with people about their culture. Don't come on as appropriating and trying to rip off, as so many Bigfoot people, wannabes and amateurs have done. And let me not put down the word amateur. It just means one who loves, not a word at all. But I mean, a lot of Bigfoot people who are getting into it and don't know much will go down to the Hoopas, especially near where the Patterson-Gimlin film was taken. And they, tell me your stories. Yeah, like that's going to work, But once I learned how to listen and gently inquire, I've been given many gifts, including a previously untold, unpublished Bigfoot story from the Kitlope that's in my book. And the reviewer in the New York Times Book Review said that was the best Native American story he'd heard, and probably the best thing in the book, So that impressed me deeply. And then there was quite a flurry of activity in the early 70s with the National Wildlife Federation expedition, some others, some recordings, lots of tracks, and then meeting Peter. And that little triad of events put me on the trail of deeper Bigfoot studies. And then the good luck of getting the Guggenheim Fellowship and then the book contract allowed me to devote a year of my life to Bigfoot studies. And then the time in the Dark Divide that became the not only the powering climax to the book, but also, of course, the book was recently adapted into a feature film that won
it was a good movie. It was a good movie. It was different than the book.
Very different from the book. We can talk
but it
about
was
that.
Good.
I'm very different. David Cross plays me in a very different way. I'm a different dog Pyle.
They didn't get Brad Pitt to play you?
David Cross played me. Debra Messing played my late wife. Tia. She was absolutely superb. David was superb too. But he plays me beginning as a doofus in the woods, because I thought about it, that's kind of hard on the ego, but any quest story like Cheryl Strayed in Wild, or Bill Bryson in the Appalachian Trail, or the Magic Flute, any quest story, the Fool's Journey in the Tarot, the hero's quest in the archetypes, has got to start out with the hero being dumb, stupid, so that you can go out, encounter, and learn. And it's the same way in the Indian stories. The Hamatsa candidate goes out from the Kwakiutl, stupid, into the woods, encounters Bok Bok Wali Nuxiwe, the cannibal spirit, comes back and goes through the dances in the longhouse, and then emerges as Hamatsa, a chief, imbued with the power of Bukwis, the male Bigfoot, and Tonakwa, the female Bigfoot, out whose mouth he crawls at the end of the ceremony. So, I mean, the filmmaker was just doing what needed to be done by making me a dope in the woods. And it's funny. David's hilarious. And then through the process, he learns. It's just that he compressed 40 years of my learning woodcraft into one big hike. And there are a couple other changes about the movie. He veers more toward the butterflies, a little more away from Bigfoot. So it wouldn't be consigned as just another silly Bigfoot movie. We got a much bigger audience that way. Shifted the date of my wife Tia's illness and death so that it becomes a grief trip for me, as well as the Bigfoot and butterfly trip. So all that was strategic, and I think well done. The movie is beautiful. It's superb. The sound is a wonderful soundtrack, and the cast is superb. So I highly recommend it. Streaming, in fact, I think it's free on Prime right now. For the first time, if you're a member.
We are.
Yeah.
But we've already seen it.
Only once.
Oh, yeah.
So I got so many questions.
Yeah, me too. But you want to go next?
Yeah.
On that, one quick thing for people who want to see is called Dark Divide is the name of the movie. The website is darkdividefilm.com. That's it. Done.
Highly recommend. It's one of the most unique, maybe the most unique.
Yeah, it was
movie
really
on the subject there.
It was
is, and
really
it's just entertaining and but as we're going to still get back to the movie, but I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you share? So you got a fellowship to take your trek. Can you share?
Did you say Guggenheim Fellowship? I was going to ask you that. Tell us about that. Your Guggenheim Fellowship.
It's one of the most prestigious privately funded fellowships you can get. Scientists, writers all vie for them, and they're not easy to get. And I was very lucky to get it. That's one reason that the movie veered more toward butterflies, because nobody would believe that I got a Guggenheim for Bigfoot studies.
But you did.
That's just as unbelievable as Bigfoot sitting on your lap right now, Dana, and feeding you bonbons. No, this is crazy. But I did. And I think there are three big reasons that I got that. One, I had a track record of books and research and other grants. Guggenheim looks for a track record. It's not for first timers. So I had that. Second thing was, I wasn't trying to prove it or disprove it or find it. Almost all Bigfoot writers are trying to prove it or disprove it or find it. This was not. It was interested in the entire question of, we know Bigfoot walks in one way or another in Northwest culture and in world culture. It's not just limited to the Northwest by any means as a phenomenon. Whether that phenomenon corresponds with the flesh and blood animal is open to question. But we would be silly to discount the evidence as it stands. And so that's the stance I took. And I said, I'm going to look into the Native American culture, the current white culture. Has it just become a tabloid joke, or does it retain any of the power and consequence of the Native American myth? Not using myth as a mistake, but myth as a belief system. So because I took that track, and then, here's why I really think I got it and got the book contract and got the movie deal, is because of the cool name, The Dark Divide.
Dark Divide.
It is a great name.
What's the history of the name Dark Divide?
It's funny, really. I'll give it away. I mean, it's a perfect name. It's alliterative. It's beautiful. It sings The Dark Divide, and it could be the divide between anything, between non-belief, spirituality in the physical realm, any belief, any divide you want. But it actually connotes a watershed divide between the Sispus River watershed and the Lewis River watershed in Washington State. They both run into Columbia eventually, but they're a big watershed divide running along a black rock ridge that run very rocky and scraggly and craggy and kind of spooky up in there. and it's wilderness, not protected wilderness, but it's the biggest unprotected wilderness in Washington. And it runs between Mount Adams on the east and Mount St. Helens on the west. Now, they're part of the Cascade volcano chain, which is mostly north-south. Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, Mount Hood, Mount Shasta, and so on. But Adams and St. Helens, Patwa and Lewitt are out of line with the rest of them. They're displaced east and west from one another. And between them runs this black rock extrusive ridge. And that is what's called the Dark Divide. And it's a very wild, very cool, very, very difficult place to get into. And it is rife with Bigfoot lore and legend from the Klickitats and the Yakimas. So it was the perfect place for me to take my study to the field at the end of my study period, not to find it, not to look for it, but to look for my sense of it after my deep immersion, my deep dig into the lore and the history. So that's the divide part. The dark part's kind of funny. For all the things it connotes, conveys, means, suggests, and for all the power it gives and its spookiness, it's just named for some dude named Dark.
Get out.
Yeah. Most people don't know that. I
That's
don't
pretty
remember
funny.
if I tell that in the book or not. But it was a pioneer named John Dark, and he was a prospector, and then he did a little logging, a little prospecting, a little trailblazing, and there's a dark meadow and a dark mountain named for him. And then they ultimately named the Dark Divide for him.
That's so cool.
I know I had.
Oh, sounds cool too.
How far north of the
I
Columbia?
think it's that cool name that really got me the fellowship and the book contract. And
That's it.
There had to be somebody on that committee that year for Guggenheim who was interested in this. Yeah. Good luck.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just fascinating.
So here you are then, you're, oh my gosh, do I have to say this word again? I'm sorry? Lepidopterist. Almost like a podiatrist, but it's a lepidopterist.
Right.
Okay. So you're doing that, and so you're interested in it because you're speaking also with Native Americans, and then are you keeping your eyes open for it as you're wandering around looking for butterflies?
Always.
Okay.
As a naturalist, I keep my eyes open for everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a cool bird, good, I'm going to watch that. I was just in Chile, so I'm seeing all these new birds, new mammals, new butterflies, stuff I'd never seen in South America, very different. Well, I'm looking at everything, but because I know stuff up here, I roughly know things anywhere in the world, what family it probably belongs to, or if it's absolutely new. And so as far as Bigfoot goes, that's just another aspect of natural history. It's a big one. I'm always attentive to everything, and or I try to be. That's what I aspire to be. And this is, I think, one reason why a lot of Bigfoot hunters and researchers don't really find much is because they don't go out there with much natural history, and they don't go out there with much of a practice in seeing everything around them. They're too tied into their gear and their equipment and their goggles and their guns, and their not many guns anymore, fortunately. But but if you're wide-eyed like a child to everything around you, and then you're also somewhat experienced in seeing the regular things, then you notice the disconformities, something that's different. The best of the Bigfoot watchers, like Peter Byrne, is a tracker. That's how he found black panthers in India and tigers. He would see the reeds and the rushes, but then he'd see a disconformity, and he'd see it a quarter mile. Oh, there's a tiger there. Nobody else saw it. That's what you got. You see, the disconformities are a little different. So yes, I'm always watching. And yes, when I was up in the Dark Divide Court, when I'm in that most appropriate areas, then yes, I'm hyper attuned for sign or presence of our friend.
So I'm sorry, Bob. So what do you think the difference? Because I'm assuming that it's pretty hard to just go out into the woods or go out into a meadow and just find the butterfly that you want to be researching. So that's got to be a pretty difficult job itself. It's not really. Like Peter Byrne can track down a butterfly because the reeds have moved. You know what I mean? It has to be a lot harder. Tell us about that.
No, it's not very hard. Some of my books about butterflies, I try to bring people. Got a book called Handbook for Butterfly Watchers. I try to give people the means of just going out and encountering butterflies wherever they are. It's not hard. You're attentive to their needs: nectar of flowers, sunshine,
Mm-hmm.
plant for their caterpillars. You learn a little something about the plants. You don't have to be a PhD botanist to know a few plants, and you watch. You see where butterflies are appearing, what they do, where they go. You go to those kinds of places. It's not hard at all.
Makes perfect sense.
It's a little harder to photograph them or to catch them, but it can be done with practice. A lot of people do it, and more photography than catching now. And most catching is catch and release now. Although collecting, we would not have the knowledge we have without the many generations of collectors. Say that right up front. The other thing is, it's extremely hard to herd a population of butterflies or any other insects by collecting. It's like trying to eradicate insects with a fly swatter. They reproduce very well. Collecting is not the problem. If you see a person with a butterfly net, they're doing a service of learning about the pollinators so that we can all know more. No, but a lot of people going with cameras now, and you'd be surprised at the wonderful pictures coming out with cell phones. Even if people are simply gentle, go forth I met a Hoopa woman on the train the other day who told me Bigfoot has been after her entire life on the reservation, but Bigfoot has also taken care of her. It's kind of a message there. And she said, Bigfoot will take care of you. Grabbed my arm and she said, she knew I'd been to Hoopa and was looking into Bigfoot. She says, Bigfoot doesn't want to be studied, but Bigfoot will take care of you too. And she said, if you go with good intentions.
Wow.
That's what it's all about. You go forth toward nature with good intentions, no matter what you're studying or looking for. And it means you're going to be attentive and caring about their needs as well as yours. And then you're going to see a lot more. This is not a supernatural thing. This is not spooky. This is just common sense. We should go about everything with good intentions, and we should go about everything with open eyes. That's all I try to get people to do. And so, Dana, no, it's not hard. Just takes a little practice.
Do you feel that's why the Native Americans are just so much more in tune and connected to the topic of Bigfoot or Sasquatch than the post-colonial Europeans are?
Yes, and it's also Bill Holm was talking about the Indians who still live near the land and the water. City Indians don't see them all the time or necessarily believe or have much knowledge about them. They become inculcated with city culture. But the Indians who still live near the woods and waters and spend time out there, they've maintained a tradition among many of them, even with modern devices that they have too. Nonetheless, in my experience, not to make a cultural or racial or ethnic generalization, but just an observation of natural history, the Native Americans of whom I'm aware would back up what Bill Holmes said. They tend to be hyper aware of their surroundings, hyper aware of their totemic and natural background, and therefore aware of this animal as well as others. When I gave the very first reading for the book at Elliott Bay Bookstore in Seattle in 1995, there was a delegation of a dozen or so Quileute Indians from La Push. This is long before Twilight, so before vampires and werewolves moves into La Push. They had real hairy monsters, Bigfoot. And they came and they said, we came to see if you treated the subject with humility and with respect. And we see, and I'm quaking. Well, did I?
Right.
And they said, and we believe you did. And then they said, may we play a tape? This is not to get you people to come out to the reservation, but it's to show you that we live among these people. Almost all Indians refer to Bigfoot as a kind of people, which makes sense because they don't have a concept of primates other than humans and Bigfoot. They don't have New World monkeys. South American people have a concept of primate. Asian people do. African people do, but not North American Indians. So naturally, Bigfoot would be a kind of people. They modify it, They'll say unevolved people or unsophisticated people, or they have all kinds of modifications, but they're people. So they say, we live among these people. And and they played this tape, and it was very akin to several of the profound auditory experiences that I've had early in my time and later in my time with Bigfoot. So yes, they are more aware, not by some ethnic descent necessarily, but by living there and carrying forth their fidelity to their surroundings that most whites and city people have lost. Sally, a great Northwest writer, Sally, sorry, forgetting her last name, but the moment said, we have forsaken our mammalian vigilance for comfort and security.
Yes, we have.
And that's what they have not done.
Mm-hmm. They have not. And basically, I think that's something that we find a lot from interviewing people in the Bigfoot world, is that it's people who are doing things out in the woods that aren't Bigfoot hunting. They're out there hunting, deer, or they're mushroom gathering, they're
camping,
hiking,
and
they're training dogs, hunting dogs. We've had stories. I mean, basically, if you want to have a Bigfoot experience, find something else that you love to do in the woods.
That's very well put. I gave similar advice. I like the way you put it. May I borrow that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
A young man I met on another recent train trip, actually was on the same trip. He's not one of these people with Bigfoot fever who is desperate to go and find it and prove it and get rich and be the one that proves it. No, he's just looking for a challenge in his life, and he'd like to experience this countryside with some kind of a focus there. And I think what you just said would be perfect for him. If he's interested in expanding his possible knowledge of the creature and its whereabouts, find something else to do. Actually, I gave him one clue that he might do out at Mount St. Helens that no one's done that I think might be a real eye opener. I don't want to give it away right here.
That's okay.
But it's something people haven't looked for that I think could be fruitful. But you're quite right. Very, very few people ever go forth looking for Bigfoot and have any result from that. My three profound track findings and my one potential sighting, none of those came about because I was looking for Bigfoot. Patterson-Gimlin is an exception, and there are a couple of others, but not many.
What do you think about the PG film? That you brought it up.
Well, in the back of the edition of the book that you have, the new edition, relatively new, I've given a list of 7 things, 7 reasons to keep your ping pong ball in the air, not your ping pong ball of belief necessarily. Belief, Grover Krantz said, I don't believe. Belief is akin to faith. He said, I accept based on the evidence. So if you have acceptance, or call it belief, fine. But if you're open-minded and would like to believe, would like to accept, as each year goes by without definitive proof, then it gets harder and harder to keep your ping pong ball of hope and open-mindedness in the air. So I give people 7 reasons to keep that up. I could give them eight profound ones now. But one of them is the PG film, because the PG film, as you know, has never been convincingly debunked by all who have tried. I was on Peter Burns' board for his last big research project, which had pretty good funding, and the Forest Service was collaborating now. They used to conspire with Weyerhaeuser to suppress evidence and information. But more recently, the Forest Service, and I have proof of that, it's in the book, but more recently, they conspired with, not with Weyerhaeuser to suppress, but with Peter Byrne to try to set up stations to fire a flesh plug to try to get some DNA evidence. That didn't work out. But in the process, Peter had the most definitive edition of the digital version of the PG film made, not enhancing the data with anything that wasn't there, but bringing out all the data that were there by the best available techniques. And I saw that CD, and I tell you, it was profound. It's so much more revealing than the fifth or sixth or seventh generation print that most of us see frequently. You could see the muscles bunching. You could see the heft of the breast more profoundly. So many other things. And frankly, I think the biometrics of it, and as I say in the book, meeting Bob Gimlin in recent years and getting to know him, I cannot believe he was lying any more than I can believe that he would have mistreated his horses, which he would not do. So I think PG is profound, one of the most profound evidences that we have.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you share that with a lot of other.
And because you saw the second generation, I'll repeat what you said, because most of us don't see the second generation of that film. We see something later, and it's just, we just don't have.
Well, we saw it when we were like little kids in the 70s.
Right.
But yeah, it came out in 1967.
Right.
Right.
But there's the original, I guess. I don't know whatever happened to the original one. So then there's the second generation, is what Peter Byrne had.
Yeah.
And that's what you study. Because do you, Bob, did you
let me clarify just one thing. First generation is commonly said to be somewhere in a safety deposit box in Florida where nobody knows. The second generation film, Rene DeHinden believed he owned it, bought the rights from Mrs. Patterson. I don't know what became of that second generation film. Peter got hold of it at one point, and this was a digital rendering of that brought out its data to the fullest extent. I didn't see the actual film projected. I saw this digital rendering, which was probably even better, and that's what I saw. Yeah.
Okay.
You were going to ask.
Oh no! Well, during that, you remember Henry Franzoni? Was he part of helping you with that?
Oh yeah, Henry's a brilliant man. I think he recently passed, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw him a couple of months before he passed, right?
I think so, yeah.
We were up there in your area and had lunch with him.
I haven't seen him in recent years. Henry was a weird and strange and wonderful man.
He was
very, very smart. His work on nomenclature of the countryside was brilliant, and what he knew about Native Americans. And his book is very intellectual and very, very challenging, and I think extremely important. Henry was an important man in the field, but I think his intellect and his the rarefied nature of what he was doing escaped a lot of people.
I think so too.
Yeah,
and he was definitely missed. He was gone way too soon. From us. So, what do you hope the readers will walk away with after diving into your book?
Well, I hope they'll come out with a better sense of the depth of the Native American, the depth and breadth of the Native American attachment to it, and the fact that it's in their clear sense of the physical world as well as in their spiritual pantheon, which they're able to integrate and separate in a way that my mind doesn't do. I just don't do that. But I don't attempt to. So that's one of the main things. Second main thing is, well, I really wanted to see it's a political book in that I really want to see the Dark Divide protected as a federal wilderness area before I croak. It's not going to happen in this administration, or possibly not with my current member of Congress, though she is pretty good. She might not do that. Our district has been gerrymandered so that we've lost a lot of the conservation voters in it. So, but someday I'd like to see that wilderness really protected. That was one, and not just that place, but all the remaining wilderness. That was a big point of the book, was Bigfoot as a metaphor for wilderness, but not just a metaphor, an actual argument for protecting these places. Not that I think Bigfoot's restricted to the old growth. I don't. I think it's pretty opportunistic in other kinds of logged over lands as well as almost fringe agricultural lands. The third thing is that I would like people to go forth with great respect for this animal and a great respect for the traditions, and above all, maybe an open mind. If they already believe or accept, fine, maybe this will reinforce them. If they're a little bit circumspect, as I remain a little bit, then I'll tell you why before we finish. Then fine, maintain that, but don't dismiss this thing out of hand as if it were silly. Don't dismiss this evidence. You would be foolish to do so. Keep an open mind. There's no big biological, evolutionary, biogeographic, metabolic, physiographic, historical, or any other scientific reason why this animal could not, should not, or does not exist. The only major objection to it intellectually, as far as I'm concerned, is the absence of definitive proof. And that's a big one. But there are also arguments why that might be the case that do not involve the supernatural. That's another thing from my book. You will not find any comfort in it for if your field of interest is the woo. It does not bring forth any supernatural approach or comfort. Not that I put these people down or say they're wrong. What do I know? I'm just a guy. I'm just a dude interested in this thing. I don't know. They might all be right. I might all be wrong. But to me, I'm a materialist biologist who feels that the laws of physics are the extent within which we may all operate, all creatures, and everything Bigfoot must conform to that. That's my personal limitation and view. So you will find that in the book, a physical and common sense approach to the animal, and a scientific one, not a woo one. And fourthly, fun. I want you to have fun doing this and not get trapped in Bigfoot fever to the extent that it wrecks your life, as I've seen it happen with a number of people.
I think a lot of people don't. There's no money in Bigfoot. There's no money in Bigfoot. You're not, you know what? Even if you do find Bigfoot, the second that we have like an actual specimen, I would imagine that it would be swept out of their hands in a heartbeat and given to people like you, people with PhDs and scientists. And I mean, I can't imagine it really like going too far for a normal person to find an actual specimen.
Kate Wolf has a great song about gold in California. She says, there's no gold. I hate to tell you, the gold in California is it's all about the gold is the dried vegetation in late summer is going to catch up. No, right. That's right. And it's a chimera. It's if you're going after it for fame and fortune, and as if you could prove it by a photograph, forget that these days. But if you're going forth out of intellectual and personal curiosity about the world and an honorable approach to caring for the world, that's the other thing about the book. I want people to come away from the book with a sense of caring and conservation for the land, but also for the animal. And as far as should it be found, should it not be found, sure, I'd like the romance of let the mystery be. In some ways, I think, sure, the mystery should maintain. We shouldn't find it or broadcast it and all that. But on the other hand, if we're going to protect this landscape, I think the definitive presence of Bigfoot would be a major means of doing so. And it could go wrong. There's a chapter toward the end of the book about a protocol for encounter. And as we know from every science fiction movie, when you find the creature, things could go wrong. And so I try to give some ways in which we might avoid that happening. But those are the things I try to bring out in the book, and questions as much as answers.
So here's another question, because I'm just getting nervous just because we're running out of time. And this is a really important question, especially for someone like you. So what do you think that, like, let's just say that Bigfoots exist. What is it? Like, where did it come from? What did it evolve from?
That one is very important. How much more time do we have?
We have about 7 minutes.
Okay. Give me a couple to tell you about my own encounters.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we might need to go past and do some editing. We might have to edit this out. Yeah.
I've said some things you could easily edit.
I
want to give this reply good attention without going too long. I've just had a very good correspondence with a man in Texas about that, whose big thing is whether or not Bigfoot has a so-called broken arch like the other great apes, or whether it has a fully a human-like arch that enables a push-off with the toes. And he thinks it does. He thinks he's got the evidence. I think he's probably right. Jeff Meldrum is not so sure about that, and Jeff is not to be taken lightly. He's a great intellect and a great scholar on anthropoids, we can say, on the primate. But the foot aside, the animal is clearly a great ape, therefore is clearly a primate. And now the taxonomy of primates is mixed up. There are those who still believe in the separating the family Pongidae and the family Hominidae. But most primatologists do not. All the apes they would put in the Hominidae, the family Hominidae. And there is no family Pongidae. There is only the subfamily Ponginae of the Hominidae, and that includes the 3 species of Pongo, the orangutans. And then there is the subfamily of the gibbons. And then there is a Hominae, Hominae, Homine, which is the subfamily of the Hominidae, which includes the great apes, not the gibbon and not the orangs. And so we're really in the same subfamily as the other living great apes. Then you get to the tribe level, which isn't always employed in zoology, but the Hominini, and that's Nini, so that's where hominin comes from. That is us only, unless it also includes Bigfoot. The Panini are the chimps and bonobos, and the Gorillini are the 3 species of gorillas. So the question becomes, does Bigfoot belong to one of those 3 tribes, or will it be shown to be a different tribe, its own tribe, and maybe even its own subfamily? Probably not its own subfamily, because as we know, if it walks, it probably shares many human-like traits. And I think this cat in Texas is probably right about the foot. Sorry, Jeff. And it's probably, I think it's probably going to be in the tribe Hominini with us. I think it will be shown that there are 2 species in the Hominini. There were lots of species in the Hominini before. It's just that they're all extinct. You know, other members of the genus Homo even. Now, will Bigfoot be in the genus Homo with us? Probably not. There's probably sufficient differences to at least erect a genus. And of course, Grover Krantz described it as a species of Gigantopithecus, which we do know exists in the fossil record. And we don't know enough about it to know where it actually would fall in that primate taxonomy. He called it Gigantopithecus canadensis. Well, that name doesn't stand, because to describe a species, you have to have a type specimen, which we do not have. Jeff described an ichnospecies, which is a fossil species from the tracks. He did that in the straight literature, not in the Bigfoot literature. One of the most profound things that's ever been done about Bigfoot. Most people don't even understand it or know that. But it doesn't count as the species to prove it as a living animal, because there was no type specimen. Still, it's very, very profound. So I think it's where did it evolve from? Well, it evolved from some common ancestor of chimps, gorillas, and humans that also gave rise to the Almosti, the Dalmas, the Yaran, and the Yeti, if they exist, and to Bigfoot. So at least 5 species probably that descended from a common ancestor. And what its common ancestor was, where it broke off from chimps, bonobos, and gorillas, I cannot say. We need to know a lot more about its DNA. But I think but there's no problem with its evolution. No problem, whatever. It's surely an ape. It's surely a great ape, and it is not surely, but I think likely in the tribe Hominini with its own genus.
I love that. That was a
Fascinating.
really great answer.
Yeah.
That was a great answer.
The correct answer for now, as pertains to the main accepted taxonomy of primates as we are now. Almost everybody just screws this up, and they also they get their knickers in a twist about, is it an ape or is it a human? That's like, is it a bird or is it a robin? You know, robins are birds, humans are apes.
Right.
So
we need to hear about some of your experiences.
on the last day of your trek,
Mhm.
you had something happen to you. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, that's a good place to do these experiences. First, I'll just say the book starts out with my first profound experience on Mount St. Helens in 1970, Halloween night, when I had my first profound auditory experiences. And I was a student of natural history, knew the birds, knew the mammals, and their vocabularies. This was not one of them. And it accorded with Indian recordings later on. So that was way back in 1970. But come forward, my month in the Dark Divide, I had 3 or 4 pretty profound vocal experiences. But the last night in the Dark Divide, coming out, I didn't want to go right back to the freeway. I'd been in the wilderness for a month. So by coming back on tiny roads in my little old Honda on the edge of the Dark Divide by Elk Pass, by Mount St. Helens, I could stay in the mountains one more night before I had to leave. Well, just coming down from Elk Pass, I'd stop to take a pee and have one celebratory beer to toast the Dark Divide, my month up there. Just one beer. I'm coasting down onto the road, gonna start up in a minute, but I heard some whistles. So I just coasted down by the slope, and from this angled bank on my left, under low alder trees, came these whistles that were not in the vocabulary of any birds or mammals I knew. And they were whew, whew, and quite shrill and fairly repetitive with some variation. And as I coasted along the bank there, they moved with me. Along with me. And just as I stopped with my lights off, only my brake light on, and was about to set the brake and get out with my flashlight and look up into it was dark, it was lightly raining, with no trees overhead. Bam! Something hit the top of my car with a loud report. And the smooth muscles take over that point, and I didn't pee my pants, but I did skedaddle. If you could burn rubber in an old Honda on a dirt road in the rain, I did. And about a quarter mile later, I said, dummy, and I went back and saw nothing. But I came back 3 days later, and where the sounds had emanated from and where the object struck the top of my car, there were a set of impressions across the mossy shale, and then on to softer Mount St. Helens eruption pumice, where about a half a dozen of the tracks took pretty well. Not well enough for a cast, but the pictures are in the book. Well enough to get measurements on 3 of them. And they were smack in the middle of Peter Burns' database for the mean and the median reported tracks, just under 16 inches long, just over 4 on the step, 3.5 on the heel. And then they came across right from where the sounds had come, and then went up onto a game trail and disappeared into the oak tracks. So what can I say? The tracks, the sounds, right there.
Well, how about the stick that what hit the roof?
I found a stick right there, a wild cherry, that was twisted off. The Indians say they twist them, not break them. And I had my idea throw it at the car several times, and it made the appropriate sound. Now, in the movie, the end of the movie recreates the scene, and it's the best ending. They got it almost exactly right. Little additions, but they got it almost exactly right. And the music, the Chris Novoselic of Nirvana recorded for this, was the most perfect ending for the movie. But in that, they make it a rock instead of a stick. But the stick was there. Now, was that the same stick? I don't know. But I do have the other stick on which I cut niches to measure the track. And that is real. What do you say about that? So
what did you think?
Well, Tia was a very, very level-headed Swede, and not particularly interested, highly skeptical. Saw the elk tracks on the game trail and said, "Oh, those are just elk tracks that have run together." She didn't take a particularly good look. But 9 years later, I had a Japanese film crew out there. They came to do a Bigfoot sequence for this crazy Japanese Hollywood Squares natural history program they had. And they brought a crew of 9. And my God, took them up into the Dark Divide. Can we find tracks now? Well, no. I'll show you where, some Bigfoot-like stuff. And I'll show you wilderness. And, this old tree has been busted up the way Bigfoot does, not the way woodpeckers do. I showed them some things to photograph, but on the way out, bam, I almost step on a track in just about the only open soil. Otherwise, it's rock, pine needles or fir needles, snow, and so on. But there's one bit of pumice there open, and there's a darn good track. And it made their entire trip from Tokyo, I tell you that.
Yeah.
And I got a cast. I came back a few days later with a reporter from the Oregonian, not because I wanted publicity for this, but he was doing a new interview with me for, they'd chosen the book for a book club for the newspaper. He wanted a new interview, and I said, "Come on up to the hills. I'll show you something cool." And we put plaster in, but it didn't set before it got cold, and it was too thin. Never got a good cast, but got the photograph of the plaster in the cast. And when I showed that to Tia, she said, maybe I was hasty. That was the second time. The third time was 10 years after that, a quarter mile away or less. And by the way, that second track was about 300 yards from the first one, the first set of tracks, the same proportions. 9 years later, suggesting the same animal on the same home range over 9 years. 10 years later, I was a few hundred yards to the south over the pass, the other side on a small logging road that went a little ways. And I was walking, looking for late season butterflies. And on this shale slope, a loose siltstone slope that was eroding, was a set of impressions going up the slope. 2 of them, one adult size, one juvenile size.
Oh my gosh.
The best one of those in the firmest of the silt were measurable also, but not firm enough for a cast. And they were the very same proportions on the adult sized one. And there was a juvenile sized one. And then up at the top where there was a horizon between the softer siltstone and the looser and the firmer, there was a horizon with a crack, and there were rodent holes there, ground squirrel dens, and there were hand plunges. I saw a cast of a hand plunge into a gopher hole. It was very impressive with an 1.5 inch fingernail came out in the plaster. But these were hand plunges, apparently, according to my hypothesis, into these gopher holes. And I interpret it as potentially not only a hunting incident, but also a tutelary one where the adult was perhaps teaching the young how we do this. And there are many, many Klickitat and Yakima stories about Bigfoot catching rodents in this manner and also by moving rocks, and some evidence of that. So do any of my experiences prove it? No, but I do not have a better hypothesis, which still leaves me in the territory of not knowing, to where I can say, I will not say I believe, because like Grover, belief is faith. You don't prove faith, but accepting it like Jane. I'm not quite there yet at this point, but boy, I'm farther than I was. When I came out of writing the book, I expected to come out, oh, great story, but no cigar. No, I came out with an open mind, which I considered a really big gift. Well, now, 20 years after the book, 3 profound track sightings, my mind is even wider open. And then 3 years ago, this week, I was coming back, next week, I was coming back from Eastern Washington, butterfly trip, coming over the very same road that defines the northern edge of the Dark Divide wilderness, Highway 12 in Washington, running up to White Pass, the very same road where one of the best biologists I know, a total Bigfoot skeptic, called and who wanted me to not do the book, not take the grant because he thought it would ruin my reputation in my career. he called me when I was doing the book and he said, Bob, I've seen it on Highway 12. I saw it emerge from one side of the road, stand in the middle of the road, squat, urinate, and then walk just like Patty off to the other side of the road into the forest. He said I went from being a total skeptic to a Bigfoot born again in 10 seconds. On that same road 3 years ago, I'm coming up to White Pass. Elk are in the road. I stop so I don't hit the elk like I did a poor deer day before yesterday, right above my house. And yeah, very sad. All these years, never hit a big mammal until 2 days ago on Earth Day. But I almost hit these elk, and that can be lethal to them and to me.
Yeah.
I barely stopped in time. And so after that, there were several of them. Let them get across, went slowly, because there were more. And what did I see in my peripheral vision? But a dark form up on the cut bank, just to my left, about 15 feet away, about 8 feet up, about 15 feet away. And I swiveled my head, and what do I see? I see Patty. I see the standard logo, one of the most recognizable symbols in the world today is the walking Bigfoot. I wanted a symbol for wildness. Well, I saw it. That's what my eyes told me. Moving out from behind one tree across a very narrow, only about 3 feet, and then behind another big tree and then into the brush. For maybe a second or two or three at the outside. In failing light, late in the day, rapidly, and I couldn't stop because there was a truck on my ass.
Mm-hmm.
I could go back. There was a blizzard coming, and it was up there. But I came back a couple days later, and I could find nothing. It was hard pan up there. Cliff went and had a look for me, and he couldn't find anything either. But I did find a mile away a lodge, mountain lodge, with a big Bigfoot sculpture in front of it. And when I would talk to the people about, have there been any recent sightings, they say, people come in here every day, and we get so many reports we've stopped counting. This is a mile. So I feel I have very likely seen the animal now.
So now here's a question for you. So did you see the animal or did you not see the animal in your view?
I don't know.
In your head? Yeah.
Certainly in my head, I don't know. I'm a human being. I'm a Bigfooter, subject to projection like any other. The light was fading. It wasn't yet dusk. I saw color, saw the brown, and I saw upright legs, not forelegs. I saw a swing of the upper appendages, and I saw a large head. This is what I see in my head that I saw. But it was very fast, and it was fading light, and I am suggestible as a Bigfoot person. So was it definitive proof to me? I'm sorry. I'm a biologist. No, it was not. I cannot say. I cannot tell you that I saw Bigfoot, but I can tell you that I think I did. And
so what if you had a sighting like your friend where it's walking across the street?
That's what I need. I need something better than that to put me over the edge. I can go there. I can easily go there. But I need something else. And I've had more than most. 3 profound track sightings, several profound auditory experiences, and one, I think, probable sighting. But it's not enough because I am a trained biologist, and I'm not a skeptic of Bigfoot because I've already told you there's no logical reason it would not be here. Like this hairy great ape. We can be here. It can be here on the Bering Land Bridge too. No, it's just that I can only say I'm at about 95% right now.
That's a great answer.
Maybe I'm 98, but that's what I've got to leave you with.
Well, that's awesome to have a PhD tell us that. That's pretty inspiring, because sometimes you talk about it and people are like, girl, you're crazy. And it's like, but it's, when you have so much evidence that's there, eyewitness sightings, footprints, we have it on film, we have some pictures,
Well, I think it's extremely heartening that fewer people are saying you're crazy. And when the Oxford group of scientists said, send us your stuff, and a whole lot of people said hair and poop and things, And they came and they did it all. They did it all in the DNA lab. And they came back and said, sorry, we got bear, we got elk, we got nylon, we got human poop, we got all kinds of things. Nothing yet, but keep it coming. These are Oxford scientists. So the tide is turning on the wall between there's hope that people will look carefully, not only, people with so-called credentials. Scientists can be the worst of the non-scientific types. They can have some of the worst closed minds of all. But there is no scientific cabal against the Bigfoot people, which a lot of people are paranoid about. They think there is. There's a little bit of intellectual inferiority complex there. They don't need.
What do you mean by that? Like that there's a cabal against the.
Because they don't have a PhD,
Right.
which is just another degree. I knew as many dummies at Yale as I did anywhere. It's just a lot of work you do, and you get just another. It's important to me. It lets me cash checks in strange towns. I use it where it's appropriate, and I do respect it. PhDs are not given lightly, okay? It does mean something, but it doesn't put down anybody who doesn't have one. Your
Right.
experience, the best lepidopterist in Washington, probably in the United States, the most knowledgeable, is a teamster. He's a truck driver. He didn't like academia, but he's the best self-taught biologist I know. But he's no lesser than I am because I have a PhD in ecology. But oftentimes, a lot of perfectly competent, sensible, smart Bigfoot hunters get a boulder on their shoulder about PhDs because they
I've
say,
never heard of this. I have never heard of this.
no, it's in a lot of the books. People will say those
Oh.
PhDs, they won't listen to us. They won't look at our stuff. They won't put, but there's a reason they get grants. They've got to pay for their labs,
Mhm.
Bring them, they'll look at your stuff. The Oxford people are doing it. But sure, there are some snotty, snobby PhDs and primate people who think it's a joke. Sure, of course there are. But there are plenty others who are perfectly interested and would look at evidence if they had, the support to do so. There's no scientific cabal against the Bigfoot people. And I think that's getting through, starting to get through.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So last plugs for the book and the movie.
Mhm.
Can you share with the audience how they can buy your book and then watch the movie?
You can buy the book in the obvious place that I don't like to push.
No, we won't talk. We'll talk about someone local, small business.
Yeah, what I push is a place that can do everything that thing can do for you, called bookshop.org.
Okay.
Bookshop.org. And they can get any book in print for you, just like the other one can, and the money goes to independent bookstores.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah. Or you can get any bookstore you want to walk into to order it overnight. It's easily available. It's published by Counterpoint Press, a mainstream publisher based in Berkeley. So the book's
Bob, I think I bought the book based on your recommendation years ago. I think I bought it at Pyle's. Does that sound right, Pyle's?
Pyle's is a great place. And
that's because I heard you tell me that, not me, but tell someone that. And I said, I'll just buy it there.
Biggest independent bookstore. It's in Portland. It's a wonderful place to go if you're ever in Portland. And you can do that online too. Just go to Powell's Books online or Powell's online. Get it there too. You'll have it in a couple of days for under $20. It's a bargain. And then the movie.
Did you buy it when we were there?
No, I ordered it.
Oh, you ordered online. Okay.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for being on the show.
The movie just out Prime or several of the streaming services have the movie, but I recommend getting the DVD, which has a second DVD with all the outtakes, and it's got all of one of the best Northwest Indian storytellers, Harvest Moon, who played the grandma in the movie, and she told Bigfoot stories by the campfire, but that all got cut out because of time in the movie. And they're wonderful, and they're original, and they're authentic. She does it professionally, and they're all on that second disc. So you can get that DVD with the Indian Bigfoot stories around the campfire, authentic, by going to the website, darkdividefilm.com, and look around and find their merch page.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, we're gonna do it because I want to see that.
Good.
Bob,
Thank you
this is
so
wonderful,
much,
sir.
Dana. The Tim and Dana Show. Now I get to be on there with Cliff and all the other good folks you've had on there.
Yeah.
I admire your podcast, and I'm so honored to be on here
Oh
with
my
you.
gosh, we are
Oh my
so
gosh,
honored,
this
Bob.
is
I am like, you're like my new favorite person.
Oh, and you're mine, both of you. And thank you,
Seriously.
everybody who's going to hear this thing.
Yeah, we're super excited. We're super excited.
Go forth into the wilds with open eyes, open ears, and good intentions.
Yep.
wonderful. Well, thank you,
Thank you
Bob.
so much,
and
Bob.
Thank you, everyone else, for tuning in.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Bob. See ya.